The fuck's my PowerPoint presentation gone? Come back. There we go. Okay. I'd like to start off this episode by apologising for my lack of uploads recently. I was violently ill a couple of weeks ago with a cold, which caused me to blow my nose so hard that I started bleeding out on the bathroom floor for 15 minutes. The second week, I kind of just got lazy, but also I was coughing every 5 seconds, so like, I couldn't really properly film it. I'm still in a similar situation, but I really don't want to put this off any longer than it has to be, so I'm going to try and persevere. I have my fourth glass of gin and tonic here, so it's going to be a fun episode. But I'd like to start off this episode by asking a very philosophical question. I'd like to ask, what is stealth? Is stealth making your way to the toilet without waking up mum and dad? Is stealth hiding behind a lenticular lens? Is stealth a ghillie suit? Who is stealth? How is stealth? Why is stealth? All these questions and more might or might not be answered on today's episode of Tedtholomew Talk. Where did I put my stealth plane? Season 1. Episode 3. I'm sorry, I feel like I've abused that joke with the guy getting hit on the head with shit, but I just find it so funny. Well, at least I did when I started animating it. He says, like, animating it was like some grand achievement. It really wasn't, but there we go. Moving swiftly on. Over the years, mankind has developed an obsession with becoming invisible, as you can see by these true-to-life AI-generated pieces of artwork. My personal favourite is man stood next to public toilet in ghillie suit, and also man seductively hiding behind a singular leaf in an office. Man in box kind of also works, but that's only because his lower torso seems to be missing, so there we go. But we're not here to talk about hiding behind trees or special lenses with magical powers. We're here to talk about invisible planes. Who, look, where did it go? Another piece of animating prowess that I've produced. I'm sorry. Now, I'm sorry to disappoint if I haven't already with my shit animation skills, but no plane is invisible, at least not to visible light. But you can make it invisible to radar. Sort of. It's more like making it seem very small to radar as opposed to just making it disappear altogether. Kind of like that episode of Father Ted where Father Ted explained to Dougal the difference between a small toy cow and a cow that's very far away. A bit like that. But first, Father Ted aside, a history lesson. Meet Sergei Kozlov. Now, I'd tell you a bit about him, but my Russian isn't brilliant. Especially in the current climate. I did translate a bit on Google, and apparently he got expelled from school in 1912. Now, was Sergei found fornicating himself in the school bathrooms? Did he get expelled for dealing out druggos after school? No, he was expelled for not believing in God. There you go. That's what not believing in God is punishable by. What's that? Future child prospects? Fuck those who don't believe in God. Cast out onto the street with you. Anyway, little did you know, according to at least one shitty YouTube channel, he was going to play a part in creating the world's first stealth plane. The Kozlov PS. Ah, there it is. Based on the Yakolev Air 3, or AIR-3, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It was a bit of an experiment, and honestly, it really didn't contribute much to the industry. We'll get into that in a bit. Unfortunately, plastic has a tendency to be quite glossy, which is interesting because anti-air things like shiny objects, much like myself. But they did prove that making a translucent aircraft out of bits lying around from your local home base was indeed possible, and so proved it was a stupid and impractical idea. But whether we like it or not, it was, unfortunately, according to a random YouTube channel, in some loose sense of the word, the world's first stealth aircraft. Also, a certain YouTube page on the internet would have you believe. You see, the internet has fooled many into thinking that the Kozlov PS was the world's first stealth plane. And I'll be honest, that includes myself for a short period of my time. But ladies and gentlemen, Germany actually beat them to it with translucent versions of the Fokker E03, the Albatros C1, along with a random prototype bomber plane. To illustrate, here's a timeline. May or may not have drawn it myself. Can you tell? This is where the Kozlov was made, about 1935. By contrast, the German stuff probably made in the late 1910s. So not only was the Soviet Union late to the party by about 15 fucking years, they also learned absolutely nothing from past efforts and contributed a grand total of fuck all to the aviation world. Well done, USSR. Gold star for you. For trying, I guess. Rant aside, we're about to get on to the juicy radar evading stuff, but first I need to address an ugly footnote in history concerning the Horton Ho 229. You heard correctly, but unfortunately it's spelled HO. Many people have looked at this plane and thought, OMG, that looks like the B2 Spirit. Northrop must have copied them, because naturally, anyone with two brain cells looks at two similar things and thinks that one copied the other. If you're one of those people, not only are you a fucking imbecile, but you're also fucking wrong. Now go redeem yourself and watch the last episode, because I talk about why it wasn't a copy in the video. However, I could be pronouncing his name wrong again. Reinmar Horton had allegedly said he'd intended to mix charcoal dust with wood glue, of all things. It's an interesting combination. Not sure what I came up with it myself, but there we go. To make a primitive stealth coating for the 229, making it so that the UK would allegedly only have mere minutes before they made it over the channel to wreak havoc on London. Sorry, the UK would only detect them mere minutes before they... I don't know what I said before. I'm on my fourth gin. I do apologise. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't see any glue on this particular piece. Just a shit ton of oxidation and what looks to be either paint or primer or something. I'm not entirely sure. Either way, lots of rust, not a lot of glue or charcoal. And in 2008, Northrop agreed because they conducted a study on the 229 and found that the proposed charcoal paint, A, definitely wasn't on the plane, and B, it wouldn't have fucking worked anyway. At least not to the extent that people that like being bent over the table and bumped by Nazis would like to think. Northrop rightly concluded its radar cross-section was only about 20% better than the BF-109, which was a brilliant plane in its own right. So, myth busted. 229 is a ho confirmed. But credit where it's due, they did make the first true flying wing. Now, I know I've mentioned the Soviet Union before and how they were a bit pathetic in their attempt to make a stealth plane that had already been made and proven impractical. But I promise you, this one has a bit of merit to it. Now, the Soviet Union wasn't exactly what you would call, how do I say this, an advanced society. But they did have one man who was literally going to change the world of military aviation forever. Back around 1930, a man by the name of Pyotr Yakovlevich Ufimentsev, I could be pronouncing that name entirely wrong, but I gave it a shot, was born. Little did the world know that this man would basically redefine military aircraft technology by producing a series of mathematical theories that I don't fully understand, surrounding the diffraction of electromagnetic waves, essentially writing a book on stealth technology. Now, Pyotr went to Moscow with his ideas on physical theory of diffraction, but did Moscow A, take his work seriously and immediately use it to produce their own stealth technology? B, keep the discovery under wraps to mature the idea for future use within the USSR? Or C, allow Pyotr to publish his information internationally because they didn't think it had any economic or military value? If you said C, you're correct. I feel like somewhere Putin either just violently vomited or threw up and fell down the stairs and shat himself. And didn't know why after I said that. But Lockheed Martin basically took full advantage of this now publicly available information and in the early 1970s ran with it and produced Have Blue, which had its first flight in 1977. And if it looks familiar, that's because it was later developed into the F-117 Nighthawk, an aircraft that's still flown in combat exercises today, albeit in more of a training capacity than something that's actively sent into combat. Now, whether the F-117 was a good plane or not is a hotly debated topic, but it did pave the way for the big guns of the modern aviation world. Aircraft, such as the B-2 Spirit, the F-22, the F-35, and of course the B-21 Raider, which was recently revealed to the public last Friday. I may or may not have been an absolute simp and stayed up to watch the live stream of the unveiling. It was pretty epic, even if we only got to see the one angle of it, but that was to be expected. Of course, America weren't the only ones getting in on the action. Russia promptly got to work on the Su-57, and later the Su-75. China got in on the action too, utilising their trademark hack the Americans and copy it with the J-20 and later the FC-31. Granted, the J-20 has its origins as the proposed J-9 from the early 1970s, but unfortunately no amount of history is going to change the fact that Winnie the Xi Jinping and his band of podgy-faced cronies shamelessly stole information from another country so they could stay somewhat relevant. If only you could manufacture a half-decent jet engine, and or stop your citizens from protesting all the time. In addition, some people might not know this, but even Japan got in on it all and created a technology demonstrator while liaising with Lockheed Martin, the X2. We'll talk about Japan in the next slide, but I also want to add that South Korea is also giving it a shot with the KF-21. The KF-21's a bit of a weird one though, because it doesn't have any internal weapons bays, which kind of begs the question, is it a 5th generation fighter? I mean, that phrase in of itself is a bit of a buzzword because everybody and their dog seems to change the definition every 5 seconds every time a new aircraft comes out, but there we go. And that's even including the F-35, by the way. Super Cruise did used to be part of the definition of a 5th generation plane, but then F-35 had Super Cruise problems, so Lockheed Martin conveniently forgot that part of the definition. But there we go. So what's next? Well, like I mentioned before, the B-21 is technically the world's first 6th generation aircraft. But America is also working on the NGAD program. In addition to this, the UK, Italy and Japan are working on the Tempest, which I think could be an exciting piece of kit because Rolls-Royce engines with a BAE Systems and Leonardo Electronics coupled with Japan's stealth technology is basically the stuff of wet dreams. I'd quite happily masturbate over that plane once it comes out. In addition to that, America's been working on a bunch of other shit too, such as weird chrome coating on their aircraft. Well, look, it's the F-117 again. It's funny how that plane keeps cropping up, even though it's supposedly retired. But there it is, in the flesh, with weird chrome coating on it. Now, unfortunately, I don't know a whole lot about the capabilities of these new fancy aircraft, and they'll probably stay that way for some time. Current theories for that chrome coating are that it's a new ceramic experimental stealth coating that reduces radar cross-section even more, but is easier to maintain. But I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the US Air Force just threw it on those planes to confuse the shit out of people. It wouldn't be the first time someone's done that, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. But there we go. Now, this is the part I was kind of alluding to at the start of the video. At least I think I alluded to it at the start of the video. I could be wrong, but prepare yourselves, for we have now got a full-blown rant coming. Now, I appreciate that I shat all over the J-20 before, but I would like to take a moment to address something that's been bothering me for a while. But who the fuck decided canards weren't stealthy? Now, naturally, to answer this question, I took to Wikipedia for my wisdom, which states the following. Canard aircraft could potentially have poor stealth characteristics because they present large angular surfaces that tend to reflect radar signals forward, which is fine, but canards are just repositioned tail surfaces. It's not like they're an entirely new control surface that's been magically plucked out of thin air. You're moving one existing surface to a different place on the airframe. Wikipedia backs up these claims with, and I kid you not, and I also appreciate the irony, a fucking PowerPoint presentation. Not only that, but one singular bullet point in a 33-page presentation. And I hate to say this, but even fucking Justin Bronk, a supposed world-renowned military plain researcher expert person has jumped on the canard bad for stealth argument, but nowhere does anyone seem to be able to explain why it's bad for stealth. Nobody. Nobody seems to have the raw source to back this up. Now, maybe I've got a room temperature IQ. Maybe there's something mentally wrong with me, but let's look at the facts for a second. Firstly, canards are just control surfaces that have been moved forwards. In fact, how do I say this? Canards, by their design, actually require a smaller surface area to act on the air because the center of lift is moved forward. At least that's my primitive understanding of it. Meaning less surface area for radar. And finally, allow me to introduce the McDonnell Douglas X-36, a scaled-down prototype aircraft that was built specifically for stealth and agility. Even NASA, it's even got the NASA stick of approval on it. So when everyone's talking about how canards aren't stealthy, everyone seems to conveniently forget the elephant in the room while they tell everyone about how a smaller, repositioned control surface is bad for stealth while simultaneously not bringing anything to the table as to why. To anyone that does that, go fuck yourself for spreading misinformation about a control surface layout that's sexier than you'll ever be. Now, I could go on and use my excuse on how I'm just one guy in a cupboard trying to take on the world with an unpopular opinion, but in this particular instance, I encourage anyone, literally anyone, to come forward and give me the middle finger and say, fuck you for being an uneducated cunt. Here's my evidence to prove you wrong. But we'll see how that goes. I really would like to understand why everyone seems obsessed with the fact that canards are bad for stealth, despite the evidence suggesting otherwise. Like I say, maybe I'm missing like a piece of the puzzle that's like blatantly obvious, but that's just the way I see it at the moment, and nobody, despite my hours of research, seems to be able to tell me exactly why it's bad for stealth. But I digress. And on that note, sadly, we've come to the end of the video. I don't know if I actually answered the question at the start of the video, but there we go. There is my PowerPoint presentation on stealth. So goodbye, and thanks for watching.